I'm Stacy Zinn Roberts, host of Live Your Passion. My guest today is award-winning guitarist, songwriter, and BMI recording artist, Frank Smith. He joins us today from his recording studio. So exciting. Frank Smith, welcome to Live Your Passion.
Thank you, Stacy. It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to see you, and I'm a big fan of your music, and I'm so happy to share it with the audience of Live Your Passion. Frank, you're known for acoustic guitar music. How would you describe the type of music that you play?
Well, I began playing when I was real young a little bit. I first kind of grew up with my parents had my half-uncle living with me who had muscular dystrophy. And I spent a lot of time in his room because he was kind of confined to his room. And he played classical music and jazz music all the time. And it just really influenced me a lot. But then when the Beatles came out, I knew I had to start playing guitar. So I got my first acoustic guitar at that time. And I took a few lessons, actually. I learned the 4 or 5 chords. But I was just stuck because I didn't really like, it was boring me to sit there and take lessons and learn note by note by note. So I kind of gave it up at that time, but I still remembered the few chords that I had. And gosh, for like 20 years, I played the same 4 or 5 chords with a few songs. I was in a couple of little bands that only used a few chords. But it just changed a lot later in life. I tried electric guitars and different instruments, but I kept kind of going back to that acoustic guitar. That was always my love. And then finally, I think when I was probably in my 20s, a girl showed me my first open tuning, which is kind of like slack key tuning that they use in Hawaii. And I tried that, and then it was years later before I really took it to the next level and really started writing music and that kind of thing. But for the first 20 years, it was just a hobby, and even when I got started, it was a hobby, I guess, playing more professionally. At least I thought it was a hobby until it just developed into a lot more for me.
How would you describe the genre of music that you play?
Okay, as far as the genre of what I play, everybody categorizes it into the genre of New Age, but that kind of has some of the foo-foo stuff and all that. And I like to call it more contemporary instrumental, which I think it is, because it does have influences of some New Age, but then some of the classicals, a little bit of jazz, all of that. But the founder of the New Age movement for guitar was Will Ackerman, and since they called his stuff New Age, I guess that's why you call my stuff New Age, because it's very much like his style of music. But how it kind of started, I didn't really plan on playing that kind of music, but I had a stressful job. I would come home from work and I would pick up my guitar and play a chord or two and sit there and play it over and over and over and over. And that's kind of how my songs started. I started with a seed, more or less, and then my songs kind of grew from one chord to the next, and then to the next. But it was just relaxing music to me because it would calm me down from the day, kind of. And then because of that, I started writing this more soothing, instrumental, soft music, which then they categorize as the New Age category, I guess.
Okay, and will you play a little for us?
Yeah, I could play a little bit if you'd like me to.
Yeah.
This is a song that's just off of a newest recording I did called Hope Returns. And the song itself is called Steady Breeze because it kind of has that movement to it. And luckily, it's become kind of a theme song for the Morning Breeze radio show down in California on KSBR. Every week now they play this song for me, which is really a treat for me to have that done. But it's not only my guitar on the recording, but it has Michael Mannering on fretless bass that adds another whole element to the song. But this gives you a pretty good idea of what the song's like anyhow with the movement. So it's called Steady Breeze.
Okay. Oh, Frank,
Thank you.
listening to your music is like going to the spa. It's just so relaxing and it fills you up with good feelings. I just love it. Thank you. Now, I have to ask you a question. You and I have known each other for a long time. You had said to me at one time that you don't formally read music. Is that true?
Right. I don't read a note of music. Like I say, when I started taking lessons, it was just too boring to me. I wanted to do too much too quick. I think I probably had ADD or something. It was just too slow for me. So I thought I could sit there and just make my own chords up and play my own thing. And a lot of people said that wouldn't work, but eventually it did, I guess. But I never read a note of music. In fact, I actually taught guitar lessons at an elementary school here in Naples for 1 year for like first through fourth grade students. But I teach it entirely different than most other teachers because I don't teach by reading music and by note. I would just show children how to play a chord and play it over and over and over till they could play it better than me. That's kind of my philosophy. And if they could take what they learned with playing that one chord, later in life they'll take it and apply that to all the other things they play. So it's a little different for me not knowing how to read music, but I play by emotion. So it's more feeling of what I feel and what I'm hearing in my head, I guess, that I want to inspire. And also the sound that's coming out of the guitar. It's like my biggest job is not to get in the way of the guitar itself because it sounds so pretty by itself, to do things a little more simple and let the guitar ring and so that you really hear the guitar itself.
You really do. Yeah, you really do. And the emotion does come through, but how do you write songs and remember them? How do you keep track of them then if you don't read music?
That's the trick. I've actually written songs I've recorded and I still now can't to this day even play them. So it's a trick when you don't write music, you can't write that down. So what I have to do when I start writing songs is draw little pictures of the fretboard and where my fingers go. And I also don't just usually play with a straight neck like this. I use a clamp that clamps onto the guitar, which is called a capo. And I actually have those so that I've cut them up into different pieces so there's little slots missing when you put it on the strings to skip certain strings. And that creates new tunings. So first of all, my guitars are usually in an open tuning. That's an open G, which is really the first tuning I ever learned. But they're in an open tuning to start with, and then when I put these clamps on that cover certain strings, it creates new tunings. So each time I do it, I use different colored capos that are cut up different ways. So knowing which color capo I had on for one song helps me a lot to remember it too. But it does get confusing, so I do have to make notes. It's kind of like you need to back up your computer. I tell people that, or students that, if you're going to write all these songs and you don't have a way to record them or write them down, you've got to make notes of some kind because even a computer crashes, you're going to crash sometime and not remember those songs. So it's a trick, but luckily I make a lot of notes. I do use a small handheld recorder sometime to record. But if I don't have the video, then I don't even know how to figure that out sometime.
It's amazing. You've devised your own methodology, Frank.
Pretty much, yeah. The hard way, but it works.
So I know a lot of your work, you collaborate with Will Ackerman, who started Windham Hill, and you did mention him earlier. How did that happen? How did you get together with Will? How did that work?
Well, you talk a lot about your avocado moment, and that was mine by far. It was the day that changed my life, I guess, even though it's continued to change since then. But back in the mid-'80s, I had been playing my 4 or 5 chords, and that's basically all I was doing. I did this one open tuning that I'm in now. I don't even think I have this song yet, but I did just a little bit in that. That's a common tuning for Joni Mitchell and David Crosby and a lot of artists that use that tuning. But I had learned that, but I really wasn't taking it to another level. I was kind of stuck for many, many years right where I was. And a friend called me up. This was when I was living in Seattle. A friend called me up and said, "You need to come over. I bought this record of this guitarist. You've got to hear." So I went to his house. He played Will Ackerman's Imaginary Road album, which was the first time I'd ever heard Will Ackerman, and who, by the way, is the founder of Windham Hill Music and started this whole genre.
Right.
But when I heard that album, I looked at my friend and said, "I'm going to do that. I'm going to learn how to write songs like that." That was the day that it all changed for me. That day I went home, got my guitar, started tweaking it around, coming up with new tunings, trying to come up with ideas. It took a while, but eventually I started creating some more tunings and starting to get some melodies developed. And it started out, like I say, as a hobby. So after a few years, at that time, I started going to an open mic. Pretty soon, I became one of the co-hosts for that open mic. It was in Seattle at Bellevue at the Crossroads Mall. And so I co-hosted that for like 10 years.
Wow.
And during that time, I kept writing new songs, and I could try them out at the open mic. But I was like the only instrumental new age guitarist there. Everybody else is singer-songwriters doing the typical things you hear around. So it's a little different for me, but the open mic taught me a lot. It taught me not only how to play in front of a crowd, but it taught me how to play through distractions, things like that. So it took a long time. In the meantime, I was playing lead guitar too, and I had several artists in the Seattle area that I was playing lead guitar for. And every now and then they would let me play like one of their songs, one of my songs. And so I really wasn't playing my music out anywhere. It was just basically at home and at the open mic. And then finally, a friend of mine, I asked him, I said, "I think I'm going to start trying to do a gig. I've got enough songs now that I could play for a couple of hours." And he kind of looked at me and said, "Who's going to want to hear your music?" And that was another moment for me, I have to say. When he told me that, I knew I have to do it. I've got to prove him wrong. So I started playing out a little bit at coffee houses, playing my own material. Soon after that, I moved down here to Florida, where I ran into you and met you at the time. But when I moved to Florida, that was the first time I really started playing out full time for a living. I started playing for a lot of the art galleries, the jewelry stores, a lot of private parties and charity events, things like that, that wanted just ambient background music for their events. So it worked out really good. It gave me a lot of practice. I also volunteered once a week at the hospital to play in the lobby or surgical waiting room to just calm down people that were coming in under stressful situations at the hospital.
Yes.
And then while doing that, one year they finally said, "Could we pipe your music through the hospital?" So we did that. We started piping with a mic in front of me, my music through the whole hospital. And that worked for about a year until they had trouble with their sound system. And then the president or the vice president of the hospital approached me and asked if I could start doing it every day. And I said, "Well, if you pay me, of course I could, but I have to make a living." Within about 5 hours, he found funding for me to start playing every day at the hospital. It just took that long, which was amazing. So for 2 years, I played every day while people got chemotherapy, were receiving chemotherapy for outpatient chemotherapy. That was one of the most meaningful things I've ever done in my life. They also then found funding to have me play another hour for the rehab patients in the rehab gyms. So while I was doing this, I was working on new material. The hospital was building a big garden called The Garden of Hope and Courage at Naples Community Hospital.
Yes.
So I was thinking I need to do a new CD, and I want to name it after that garden. So in the meantime, I've never recorded in a professional studio. The first 2 CDs I did with my computer at my home. There was no editing. I just played my songs a few times and then picked out the best sounding ones out of it. That was my first 2 CDs. I had an instrumental CD and another one with vocals that I did. First one was called A Semblance of Rings, and Then I'm Coming Over was the second one. But they were just kind of, they're again amateur, kind of still the hobby for me. But I wanted to take the step and record in a really nice studio. So I thought, who better than to maybe contact Will Ackerman's studio and see what it would cost to go into his studio. Even if he wasn't around, I just knew his studio would record the quality of sound that I really thought that I wanted, that he always had. So I talked to his studio engineer, and he said send him a couple of CDs, so I sent him my 2 CDs. Well, about a week went by, and I was out at lunch with a couple of friends, and the phone rings, and I pick up the phone, and it was Will Ackerman, and who blew me away that he was calling me. And he said, Frank, I would really love to produce your next CD. Would you consider letting me do it?
Would you consider letting me do it?
Of course, once I got up off the floor after having that happen, he said, I would love to add other instruments. Would you ever think of letting me do that to your music? And I said, well, that's what I've always loved about your music. You use cello, English horn, violin, all these instruments around your guitar. So I said, I would love it, but I don't have any idea how to do that. He said, don't worry, just practice your songs, come play your songs. I do all the rest.
Wow.
I'll bring in other people, add these other instruments, and do all the producing, the mixing, and all that stuff. So it was like finally 15 years after I'd heard him, or 20 years after I heard him, it came back full circle that now I was going to be able to start recording with him.
Amazing.
So this was a scary thing for me. You wouldn't believe how scary it is to play in front of the person that inspired you to start writing music and to play guitar in the first place.
Wow.
So I practiced up, I saved up my money so I could go up to Vermont where his studio, by the way, his studio is called Imaginary Road Studio, which was the name of the first album that I heard of his, which was another magical moment.
Yes.
But I went up a day early into his studio, not to record, but just to meet him. So he wanted me to do that to break the ice so it wouldn't be so scary.
Okay.
So the first day I went up, it was the last day of the soccer finals, and he's real involved into soccer. So we sat down for about an hour and watched the soccer game, which was really great. We had a beer together, watched the soccer game, and just relaxed. Afterwards, he walked me around the studio, showed me the studio, introduced me into his engineer, and kind of showed me what was going to be happening the next day. So that really helped. It took, a lot of the fear and the stress away, so that now I knew this guy a little bit, and we'd laugh together and joked a little. So it wasn't going to be quite as hard.
He became a human being to you instead of the big icon. He became real.
It became a real person versus this bigger-than-life thing that you imagine people are. I still have that problem. You see famous people and you imagine them bigger than life, but it's all just people. Everybody's just like you and I. I mean, no different.
It's true.
So the next day, I went into the studio and I recorded the first song, one that I'd written here in Naples. I played on Fifth Avenue for one of the evenings on Fifth, and it was a hot summer day. And while I was sitting there preparing to play, I got there early so I wouldn't be too hot when I started. I sat down behind the sliver, a piece of shade behind a palm tree. And as I was sitting there writing this song, I kept having to move my stool over a little more and a little more and a little more to stay in that sliver of shade. So once I wrote the song, I named it Chasing the Shade, which was appropriate.
Yes.
So I played that song. I think I played it 3 times in the studio once we started recording. He had me play it 3 times in a row. Then he was in another room with a glass window watching me in the soundproof room doing the recording. After I got the 3 cuts, he said, Frank, we've got a song. He says, can I come talk to you? So I said, sure. So he walks in the studio, and I'm thinking, what is he going to tell me I did wrong, or how can I need to improve it? Instead, he goes, Frank, he says, that was beautiful. He says, is there any way that you'd let me play along with you on that song? That was the first song I recorded. So once again, I fell off my stool. I had to pick myself up and say, of course, what do you mean? You're the reason I play music. Of course you can play along with me. So that started a neat relationship that started really 20 years before when I heard his album. But now here I was sitting with him, recording music, him playing on my album with me. He played on several other songs too on the album, and of course those are my favorite songs. Even though they might not be the ones that get the most airplay, they're still my favorites, just having him play with me. But and then he did bring in the other artists, cello, English horn, violin, some piano, bass, all these things that really just gave the color around my music. So that's how that album developed. So I mentioned I wanted to name it after the Garden of Hope and Courage,
yes,
but I wanted to separate it a little bit from the hospital too. So I named it Gardens of Hope in honor of all the gardens being built all over the country for that purpose, for reflection and meditation and de-stressing at locations like hospitals or inner city parks, things like that. So.
Frank, it's an incredible story, and it was because you just took the initiative. You just thought, well, that's the best place to record. Maybe they'll let me record. Wow. So, as you know, this show is called Live Your Passion, and you are certainly doing that. And you've just taken us through your whole journey. What advice would you give to an aspiring musician who has dreams like you do to become a recording artist? What steps would they take besides maybe calling up their hero, which you did amazingly? What advice would you give?
There's several things really, but one of the main things I tell people is I encourage people all the time that play music to play original music. I meet lots of artists that play cover songs. Then I ask them, if you've written a song, play that for me. When they play it, you see a total change in their personality, the way they play the song, everything. There's an energy and an emotion that comes out with original music that you can't get when you're just sitting there playing cover tunes, copying what somebody else has done. Yeah. So I really encourage people to play their own music always, because of the fact, like the guy that told me, nobody's going to listen to your music. Now he's still playing in coffee houses in Seattle, and my music's on Soundscapes, it's on the Spa Channel, it's played on most of the major airlines and things like that. So if you stick with something you really love to do, which I feel your original music is like that, it's more passionate for you, it's more of who you are, letting that out and expand, that's the key. That's what can really blossom for people, I think. Not that you can't do it with cover music, that's a lot of fun, but I think people, if they find what really they love the most, if it's writing that song and then getting that out in front of people, they need to stick with it. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and years of practice, playing out places, seeing what works and what doesn't. But if you love it and you stick with it, it's never a chore. It's never a job. It's just fun. So I'm a firm believer in doing what your passion is. Do what really feeds your soul, your spiritual life, and in turn, it just makes sense that in turn it's going to feed your pocketbook. It's not like you can do it for the money. You do it because you love it. And if you love it and do it enough like that, then the money part comes back to you. So it's like, I have several passions. You know, probably I do several things other than just write music and record music. I also own a CPR training company. I have a passion for teaching, and I love getting in front of people and teaching them how to save people's lives. This year alone, I think I've had 7 students that have saved somebody's life. So wow. That makes it all worth it too. So I love doing the things I have passion for. And you kind of know that. I've promoted gratitude in my life. That's one of the key elements, is to wake up every day and think of the things you're grateful for versus thinking of the things I don't have. That's been a big, big issue for me. I go to bed every night and count my blessings versus worry about things that I don't have. And that in turn leaves me in a good frame of mind, sets me up for writing a good song, sets me up for being happy every day for teaching my classes. So I tell people all the time, my two biggest passions are teaching and writing music and recording music. And I'm one of the luckiest people in the world because I get to make a living doing those things that I love to do so much.
Absolutely. And Frank, I have to thank you because you and your lovely wife Heidi have made an amazing impact on my personal life. You created the gratitude beads. You were just talking about being grateful, and they're like mala beads where you say a gratitude for every bead that's on the strand. And I did that for years and years and years. And it totally changed my life by introducing a daily practice of gratitude. And I am who I am today, in part because of what you taught me. And I want to say thank you.
You're welcome. It's a blessing for me, too. That's actually how you and I kind of met. We met through laughter yoga, and then I needed help when I was marketing the gratitude beads that I was putting out and stuff. And you helped me tremendously on that. And in fact, they still are out there. I have them on eBay now. If you type in gratitude beads or gratitude beads 101 on eBay, they're sold on eBay still.
Perfect.
So I still promote it. But that was kind of like, it's really about my philosophy of life. My philosophy of life is summed up with what I think is one word. Some people think it's two words, just love. But I use that as one word. And that is like, I think, all you have to do, all there is. It just sums everything up. And gratitude is one form of showing love. It's showing love for the things we have. And if you focus on that versus focusing on what you don't have, the lack of love or the lack of gratitude or just lack, period, that's, to me, what would always draw me down. So I've just learned through life to not focus on that side, but try to focus on the glass half full side.
Perfect.
But the beads really help me because it's a device just to count with, and it makes it so it becomes automatic. And like everything, if you do it enough, it becomes a habit. Just like playing a song over and over and over 100 times gets it to where it becomes the song that's good enough maybe to play on the radio.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen by doing it once. It took lots of repetition and time. So the beads are exactly that for gratitude, just to count off every time to think of something you're grateful. Once you've done it a couple of weeks, then it becomes automatic. You don't even really have to have the beads anymore.
It's just normal.
You're in that frame of mind.
So Frank, gratitude beads are on eBay. How can people buy your CDs now?
Well, my CDs can be downloaded on iTunes, on Amazon. They're sold on CD Baby, which is the biggest independent CD sales company in the world, cdbaby.com. You can also find out a lot about me at my website, which is justlovemusic.com.
Great.
So it's www.justlovemusic.com. Just Love Music.
Perfect. Frank, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be a part of Live Your Passion. So wonderful to have you here.
Well, it's so great to see you, Stacy. We miss you down in Florida. A lot of the people don't realize I lived in Washington. You lived here. Now you live in Washington, and I live down in Florida.
We just switched.
We switched places, but we're still staying in contact. So thanks so much for having me on your show. It's a great show, and I hope everybody keeps watching it, not only just to see my part, but all the people you have on your show are so inspiring. It's great.
Thank you. That means so much. And I'll just sign off and say I'm Stacy Zinn Roberts. This has been Live Your Passion. Thank you. Bye.